Oh my goodness, check this out. We've got a pool of water forming on the bottom of the fridge side of our side-by-side refrigerator. And guess what? This is the culprit. If you poke your head back there behind your fridge, mounted to the wall is a water tank that holds fresh water so that when you fill up your water glass, you've got fresh water that's cold. So check this out. It actually failed. This part is about 6 to 7 years old, and it sprung a leak in a major way. Good news, though, it's not an active ongoing leak. Only when you actually try to fill up water does the water cycle through and water spill out. So this is obviously a problem, and today I'm going to show you how I fixed this, not actually buying a new piece to replace it, because guess what? The new piece, if you read the reviews, also can fail within a matter of months or maybe a year, and I really didn't want to be in the same place, and I wanted more of a permanent DIY fix. So I'm going to show you how I did it in a super cheap way. So here we go. First, we're going to obviously clean up the spilled water, the leaked water. And it was quite a bit. Now, an indicator is that your water, when you fill it up, it'll actually stop working. You'll be like, what's wrong? It's not working. The second symptom is that you'll hear a sound, a spray sound, and that's the water obviously leaking. So we're going to pull out the refrigerator from the wall very carefully, and making sure we don't pull any of the water lines or the electric line tight. In this case, we've got plenty of slack. So I'm going to take this opportunity before we continue here to turn off the water. In this case, I've got a quarter turn valve that attaches the fresh water line from the wall to the fridge. So I'm going to turn that all the way off. Now you might discover you don't have a water shutoff valve behind there. It just goes, the line goes directly into the floor, for example, or the wall. In that case, you're going to want to call a licensed plumber and have them install a shutoff valve. Highly recommended that you do that, or you're going to have to shut off the water to your main, to your house, and do without water for several days. So that's not good. Next, we're going to just follow the water line up here, and that's the water filter. The leak has nothing to do with the filter. It's possible that it does, but in this case it doesn't. I clearly identified the leak earlier. It's coming from this piece of plastic, and we're going to get this out and actually test it out. I'm going to pinpoint exactly where the leak is likely to occur. So stay tuned for that. That'll be, I think, a really important part of this process if you are thinking about DIY fixing this part like I did. So with the fridge out and the power and the water off, well, the power's still on. You can see the lights there, but you'll want to turn off the power eventually to your fridge. Just unplug it at some point, and I'll show you that in a second. But we're going to take out the shelving. We don't have to take out the top pieces, but definitely the bottom and the middle. We can leave the very, very bottom one. If you drop a screw or something, you're going to have to end up taking it out. So it kind of depends. I do recommend taking out from the middle all the way down, because you basically want to have access to that reservoir back there. So go ahead and unplug the fridge from the unit at this point. And by the way, keep in mind, I'm not a licensed plumber. I'm just a DIYer, and I am figuring this out by myself. So you're going to want to take everything with a grain of salt, apply it to your own specific application and context, right? And of course, call a professional if you're not sure, or if you're uncertain about or uncomfortable really with certain things here. So this part is pretty easy. We're going to take off this little toe kick piece, and we have to open the fridge and the freezer side-by-side doors in order to gain access to the screws that adhere or set that piece of gray plastic to the bottom of the fridge. And why are we doing this? Because you're going to need to disconnect part of that clear tube. Can you see that whitish clear tube in the bottom left of your screen? Yeah, it kind of tucks back there, and it connects to your water tank. So we're going to need to remove this piece to gain access to the joint that we'll be disconnecting. So to do so, we've got a drill. I recommend a screwdriver, because you don't, especially when putting this piece back in, you don't want to crack any of the plastic. That's a real thing, and it can happen. So, but in this case, it's pretty easy to remove with a drill. I don't have to worry too much about cracking anything. And 2 screws hold this piece in, and you're gonna probably want to take this time to clean it really well. That's what I did. Rinse it underwater, vacuum it, and also clean all this stuff. But that's that joint I was talking about right there, that little blue coupler piece. So there's the main line there. Well, it's not the main line, but that's what carries fresh water from the back of your fridge to the freezer door, if that makes sense. And it comes up right through these two holes. So I'll explain that in just a minute. There's two holes there. One of them contains kind of a longer tube that we just saw, and a shorter one. But let's go ahead and take this piece apart first so you know kind of what I'm talking about in more detail. So depending on your fridge model, this part I think can be kind of tricky. It took me several minutes to figure this out. There's this like flap piece that covers the light, and behind it, if you kind of bend it up gently, there are two screws that you twist off by hand. They're not, you don't need a screwdriver. You can't use a screwdriver. They're just twist off. So we're going to undo that one. And then we're going to undo, see they're white like that. And make sure you write down where you take these out. You're going to have about, 10 to 12 screws when this is all said and done out, and you're not going to remember which ones go back where. So you're going to want to take a note or take a picture of that prior to, and definitely keep them separated. So there's one on the right, one on the left. Those definitely need to come out. We've got about 3 layers of stuff here that we need to take out before we can remove that S-shaped reservoir. So next we're going to unscrew this set screw over here. And then let's get this cover off. If you're curious about how that works, check it out. It just sits atop. There's like a little cutout on the back. So it just lifts up. So you don't actually fold or bend anything, right? If there's tension, back it off. No, you don't want to do that. But it should just lift all the way off. And with that piece off, this second little plastic piece, the one that had those 2 set screws that we just removed, should back off and come out really nicely. You might need to unscrew the light right there to make it twist in order to get these pieces out. And then the styrofoam that covers the reservoir will pop right off. It's super easy to do. And we're going to remove now the final set screw of the reservoir. So the reservoir itself has a set screw, 2 of them, one on the left and one on the top. So the reservoir is out, and we'll take a look at that in just a minute. I also want to take the time to, this is something you'll have to do, take off you need access to the back of your fridge. This particular fridge model has kind of this cardboard cutout, and it's held in place by 6 different bolts/screws. You can use a screwdriver or a ratchet to remove all 6 of those. And they have little washers on them, so you want to make sure those don't fall off. And we'll keep those in a safe place. And then with those removed, we can take off the cardboard cutout, the access panel, so to speak. And vacuum, it's going to be pretty dusty, pretty dirty back there. So take this time, clean off your condenser if you need to. Look at that, that's pretty gross. Pretty nasty stuff that can't be good for the fridge, right? Long-term performance-wise. Anyway, click that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video if you think somebody might benefit from a fridge repair or really any cool DIY video. I do videos every week or so. Various home projects and things that I deem worth buying. Anyway, okay, so we're going to get back here on the left. There's a clear tube going into a blue junction. Can you see that? Right there. We're going to have to remove that, and that's the anatomy here. See that long tube? That's the one that goes all the way up to the freezer door at the front of the refrigerator that we saw earlier. And both of those little tubes will come up into the inside of your fridge. That's where they're going right there. Can you see them? So one of them's a short tube, one of them's a long tube that we saw earlier. The short tube is right here, and we're going to have to take that apart like I just mentioned. Not apart, but we're going to have to remove it. And you can pretty much do it with one hand. You're going to want a towel. There will be water in this reservoir. So get a towel and be careful that water doesn't spill on any electrical components. They should be well off to the side, but you don't want that thing spraying around. Okay, you see that? I should have kept it more to the left, but we are safe. We didn't get water anywhere. So that piece comes out just like that. And if you're not sure how I did that, you need to press up on the white piece of plastic and then remove the tube. So you can rewind that and see how I did that. And I'll show you again here pretty soon, because we're going to do the same thing to the one on the front of the fridge, and you'll get a better shot because things are a little condensed back here. It's hard to get the camera angled correctly. So that should dangle freely, the one that you just took off. And we will clean up the water, of course. And again, the other end goes right up into the refrigerator. Next, let's go back to the front of the fridge, and we are going to disconnect this piece. So watch how this works. With one hand, you will hold the little plastic ring, kind of pinch it back, and in the opposite direction, you'll remove, with the other hand, the tube. It's super easy. There's a black line on the tube, by the way. Take note of that, because when you put this back together, you will have to sink that tube all the way into the blue junction, or the blue coupler, all the way until that black line is no longer visible. And that's how you know that it's installed, again, correctly. And it's pretty much leak-free. Super awesome design. So here it is. That piece is disconnected now. And watch this. You can see here we can push that long tube. And I want to push it a little bit like this. Let's open that door so you can have a better view here. And watch. With the reservoir disconnected from the wall on the inside of the fridge, we can now pull these tubes all the way up. Now, before you do this, if you notice a sticker on the end of a tube, you're going to want to cut the sticker off before you try to pull them through these little tubes here. That one was good, nice and easy. This one, however, has a sticker on it, and I didn't notice that until I got to about, see, I'm pulling it up from the floor there. It's just going to come right through the top. There'll be maybe a little tension. And basically, you can't pull that sticker through that little white grommet piece. So that's what the problem. So the grommet piece will actually come out. That's not a problem. They just slide in there. So just take off the sticker. Let's see if I can wrestle this down with one hand here. Oh, and again, we do have water in the reservoir. So have a big towel waiting. That reservoir is pretty full. I mean, it can hold a lot of water, a lot more than you think. But if you just tilt it up, you can stem the water flow, just like that. So with one hand here, let me wrestle off this sticker, and I'll slide that grommet off the end. See that black line I was telling you about earlier? Just something to pay attention to, right? That black line is there for a reason. We'll talk more about that again. Okay, let's put this grommet piece back in, and we'll press it all the way down. And if you want to waterproof that, you could put a little 100% silicone in there and actually adhere those grommets to the inside of your fridge so they don't pop out again. Okay, here's the old piece. Now, most people would just buy a new one, and I'm certainly going to put a link in the description below. I did buy a new one, but I was really uncomfortable just reinstalling it, like I had mentioned earlier. The same problem, they're apparently not a very well-designed piece. Although I think plenty of people are successful, if they hold up for another 3 or 4 years, then I think that's a pretty good buy. So that is certainly an option for you. Just buy a new one. But I'm going to do a little DIY testing because this channel is all about saving time and money, doing a little DIY style. So we're going to take an old cork, yes, from a wine, not the old school cork, but one of those like plastic spongy corks. And I'm going to bring this old tank, this reservoir downstairs to my basement faucet. And I used to use this piece when I brewed my own beer back in the day, and it's basically an adapter piece that connects your sink here to a tube, right? Because brewing your own beer requires you to cool your beer after you bring it to a boil, and that's kind of what I use this piece for. But that's another story. So I drilled 2 holes in this cork, and one a little larger and one a little thinner. And the idea here is that this piece converts to being able to receive the tube here, because we are going to test out, and I wanted a better view of exactly where that hole, where did this tank fail, right? The piece of plastic sprung a leak. So where was that happening? Now, I cannot replicate that high pressure that happens within the system once it's installed on the fridge. I can't replicate it. This sink doesn't have that type of pressure, and that cork certainly won't hold. But I'm going to go ahead and get a bucket here, and I'm going to turn on the sink, and I'm just looking to see, okay, where is that leak exactly coming from? Let me turn it all the way up here for you, and check this out. We saw that earlier at the beginning of the video, spraying out heavily, but now I can see a little bit better, have a better angle of where that's coming out. So I'm going to make note of that. On the right hand side, when it's in the position of being mounted on the wall, on the right hand side at the top, on the seam, there is a crack or a hole. Some type of failure happened. This is the new one, by the way. And like I said, you would have the option right now of just installing the new one. So if that's true, you would fast forward this video, and I'll show you how to, put this piece back in. But like I mentioned, we're going to be approaching a DIY fix for the used one. By the way, the pieces are virtually identical. I couldn't tell any difference. So the first test that I did involved this heat stapler that I bought, and I've never used one of these before. I also bought a kit with different types of plastic because I wanted to make sure if I tried to heat up plastic that it was the right kind of plastic so that it would bond to the type of plastic that I'm dealing with. So in this case, this is the plastic that I am appears to be a match. And now I've never used one of these stapler things before, but right off the bat I'm seeing that no, I can't do this. A hot stapler gun like this actually is designed to adhere to pieces of broken plastic. It has a lot of different applications, but you're supposed to sink that staple into the plastic, and I'm not comfortable doing that, right? Nor is that the appropriate, no. But I am testing to see, will this plastic melt and adhere to this type of plastic. So I sanded this part down. This is just a little test, just sanded it down so it's not oxidized plastic. And I'm seeing that it's not really adhering very well, unfortunately. So that was a bust, and I'm not going to do that. My next test involved this stuff called plastic weld. Have you heard of it? It's like a putty, like an epoxy putty. And I'm going to be applying that and see how that holds up, if I can patch the hole. So I'm going to use some degreaser, and then I'm going to use some Dawn soap. Probably overkill, but I wanted to make sure that it's super clean. And I'm also going to be sanding it a little bit and then rinsing that off because you want your adhesion to stick, right? I mean, if you're gonna test something out, you don't want it failing because you forgot to prep it adequately. So this is the prep work, and I'm following the instructions on the back of the box, but also using a little common sense here. How can I get rid of grease and then sand the whole darn thing? Not everything, but just the seam. So this is the plastic weld that I am dealing with. Like I said, it's like kind of looks like some type of plastic explosive or something. It's this tubular epoxy, and the idea here, I'll show you how it works. The idea here is to mix some up, and I'm going to apply it to this joint, just like that. Or right there, I should say. So we're going to peel off some, and I had never used this stuff before. Using a glove was kind of a hot mess, and so I'm just using my bare hands. I don't recommend that. Neither do the instructions, but I couldn't really use it super well. So I'm gonna get it nice and mixed up, and I'm going to apply it in various positions, and I'm going to just put it on all the joints while I'm at it, not just the joint that failed. And it kind of looks like that. And it says 3 hours to cure time, but I'm going to let it just sit overnight just to be sure. What do you think? Do you have any guesses? Is that going to hold? Well, we shall see in just a minute. By the way, if you're wondering about other DIY patch ideas, I pretty much ruled out 100% silicone. I applied some to my little test spot on the reservoir. Again, sanded it down for adhesion purposes and cleaned it. And I also use the gutter patch. This is for like gutter. You're supposed to put this stuff in the seams to basically all this stuff is designed to stop water, right? And then some exterior sealant specifically for water applications outside. The problem is, it didn't adhere, especially the silicone, to the plastic. This stuff, the gutter caulking, definitely adhered a little better, but it was still kind of flaky or didn't stick as really well as I wanted it to. And then this stuff got really hard as well, but the exterior adhesive, but I really wasn't happy with it, and I didn't think it could hold up to the pressure demands with this hole that was created. So the next morning, here's the patch. You can see it actually turned into pretty much a plastic-like material. It was really hard to scrape off. It didn't crack off or anything like that. So we're going to get this thing tested out. So I'm going to not fully reinstall everything the way I would if I were, walking away. I just want to test it to see. So in order to hook this thing back up, I'm going to slide that short tube back through the hole on the inside of the fridge. And I have to sink this thing back into the blue coupler or junction. And to do that, I need to make sure I have a visual eye on that black line, as I mentioned earlier. We have to make sure that goes all the way in and you can't see that black line. That's how you know it's deep enough. And that's, again, really important to make sure you don't have create another problem of a water issue. And we'll check that too in just a minute. Now, I'm not going to thread my long tube through at this point because I'm just testing it out. But I am going to hook this baby up to the front where it was before. Again, sinking that black line deep and then turning the water back on behind the fridge. I'll put my towel down just in case we've got some drippage here. And let me remove the caution tape here. Do not use, do not use. And, I gotta plug that back in. That would be a good idea. And let's give it a test. So the water is not turning on because the filter or the reservoir has to fill up first before, in other words, the water has to get all the way through and cycle through that reservoir. Let's get a little closer. You can see it actually filling up. And then, all right, fixed, right? Well, unfortunately, you cannot say it's fixed based on one glass of water. But I am very optimistic. Stay with me. I will let you know if this works or not. It does seem to be holding. It's dry. That's good. That's good. Again, that seal was on that hole is on the top right. So I am feeling pretty good at this point. Yeah, baby. This patch seems to be holding up. By the way, if you are installing a new piece, you're going to want to cycle several minutes worth of water to get all that factory stuff, gunk, out of the plastic or the tubes before you drink out of it. We are dry back here. That's an important thing to remember to test out, right? Each time to make sure your junctions are dry. Okay, we're looking good. I've got 4 to 5 cups of water. We are dry. And I am feeling pretty good. So I'm going to put everything back together. And I'm not going to fill this up with food because over the next day or so I'm going to monitor that to make sure it is holding. Oh, and guess what? It failed. Oh no. I was really hopeful, but this patch ultimately did not work. Is that what you thought earlier, seeing this patch? Yeah, it's pretty sloppy DIY, but I was hopeful. It was super hard, secure, but it apparently didn't form the correct bond. So I'm going to sand this stuff off. You can also chisel it off. Not that you're going to try it, right? And so my last attempt before I was going to install the new one here is using this thing. So I liked the idea earlier of kind of melting plastic to help create a patch, but the tool was wrong and the plastic was wrong. So in my third and my final test here, this is what I am going to use. This is a soldering iron, and again, I had never really used one of these before. I will put a link in the description below for this, but this has not those staples that you saw earlier, but an actual point or a tip that you can actually kind of use and kind of get down in there a little bit better. It comes with a stand, and there are LED lights on it as well, which is nice for visibility purposes. So I'm going to take the old Reservoir out to the garage. I'm going to put a mask on too, because you don't want to be breathing melted plastic. That's bad news, right? And be really, really, really careful. Now I'm going to take a little bit of there was one clip that wasn't used. I actually ended up clipping off the wrong one accidentally because I had it inverted. But the point here is that the plastic will adhere to the plastic because it's the same type of plastic, right? You don't have to buy anything. And I would recommend cleaning the workspace. One problem I had here was that the melted plastic picked up dirt and contaminated it a little bit. But for the most part, it was pretty clean. So I'm going to take a little bit of, before I pick up that piece of plastic, I am going to very lightly, and this thing gets crazy hot, like 900 degrees hot. So be careful you don't actually put another hole into it. That would also be highly problematic for you. So we're very carefully kind of penciling or drawing where that, and we're doing some cross sections, and the idea is to melt the plastic to go into and block that hole that we had without penetrating the entire depth of the plastic, right? Because again, that would create a hole and render this entire operation useless, and I'd have to install the new one. So I'm going to take the little piece of plastic here that we snipped off, and I am going to melt that piece and adhere it on top of the plastic. So my technique here was first, without that clip, just to melt the hole and doing some cross sections like that. And then with the piece of plastic, I wanted to actually add an extra layer of plastic that was melted and adhered and fused with the existing plastic. That is the idea and the theory here. And then once that plastic dries, we should have a completely patched hole that is secure and strong because it's plastic, right? It's the original plastic that this thing was made with. So I'm actually clipping off two small sections of the existing clip, so excess plastic, and melting it on top of the hole. And it's going to start turning colors because that plastic on the soldering iron tip will start to melt and burn and turn a dark color. And like I said, there may have been a little bit of dirt picked up because the piece fell on the floor one time, the piece of plastic. But this is what it looks like when it's done. It's a discolored but welded piece of plastic. And we're going to test this out, of course, to make sure or to see how that holds up before I put my stamp of approval on it or not. So this time I'm feeling a lot better right off the bat compared to that plastic weld adhesive stuff that we put on there. So I'm going to actually kind of install it for the most part all the way, right? So getting those two hoses hooked back up, mounting it in its vertical position, and letting that reservoir fill up. Remember, the water and the electricity is back on. Don't forget to turn that off each time. That's super important. And we are definitely holding. That's good news, but we've been here before. I've said this before, right? One glass of water is not. So it's going to have to, be tested and monitored for several days before you can start thinking about walking away from it. Now, good news, that leak only happens again when the water is depressed. And your first symptom that you'll notice is that the water just doesn't turn on. It doesn't work. Your glass won't fill up. And so you'll immediately want to go under there and see. We're going to fill this huge thing up as well the next day. You can see we've got the shelves and whatnot back in it. We've got some food in it. And we are dry, baby. I am liking this. Okay, so we're going to consider that patched, and we're downhill from here. Let's get this thing hooked back up, because I had done that various times, but you might be wondering, okay, how do you actually put it all back together again? So we're going to put the reservoir in, again mounting the top one first, and then the side one as well. And remember, I had accidentally clipped off the wrong clip, darn it, but that's okay. There was still enough back in there to get it a lot of tension, so that thing's pretty sturdy. So I'm happy with that. Now, a little trick here for this foam pad that may cover, you might just take a razor blade and just cut that so you don't have to actually push both tubes through there. You can just open it up like that and then kind of clip it on. So you can install the reservoir first and then put that insulating pad around the tubes. It's going to make your life a lot easier. That's what I discovered. Okay, so with that mounted, we're going to put the styrofoam back on and put that into place. And you may or may not, well, we'll come back to that in just a minute. What about that tube, that really long tube? Well, you might need to fish it a little bit out of there. See if I can grab my screwdriver and just kind of, and that should be dry. It shouldn't be spraying anything anywhere, so. And you'll just kind of fish it through. And you're going to want to loop it on the inside of this black metal piece. And it's a bit awkward. Let me put the camera down. And I know my hand's blocking it, but I need two hands here. We're going to hold that white pin down on the blue piece. And then with our right hand, we're going to push the line all the way in so that that black marker disappears. Behind the fridge, we will make sure that that is dry. You might want to make sure your connections are all dry too, because you've been back and forth, right? So hopefully you didn't tug anything or nothing pulled or whatnot. We've got our small line going back into the blue junction back here. We can't see the black marker, so that is deep enough. And let's go back to this piece in the fridge. So we've got our styrofoam on. And next we'll put that long kind of middle piece, I call it, using those two screws that are screwed in by hand. There's no screwdriver here. And you just want to get it kind of tight and make sure it looks level. And you may need to loosen up the light to get that piece. You kind of wiggle it in a little bit. And then you can tighten up the light piece. And then this piece, if you remember from earlier in the video, kind of slides down on top of the screws that are already in the back of the wall. So those just kind of snap in. And that's kind of what it looks like. We'll turn our water back on once all of our connections are back up to go. By the way, if you do have a drip, you're going to need to tackle that. That's what happened to me, but that's another video. You can search my channel on how I switched out that braided cord because the compression piece failed, the gasket failed. Now the shelves, to get those back in, be really careful. The middle one with that kind of deli drawer is really straightforward and easy. The bottom one has a piece of glass, so you're going to want to remove that glass first. Here is how this piece installs. You can see on the back we've got some slots, and they push in to the hinges in the very back, just like that. And then the front two will drop down and secure nicely on those front hinges. So super easy. And then I do recommend taking that glass out before you do this piece and then dropping in the glass after the shelf is in, just to make sure. You don't want that glass because it does pop out really easily, so you don't want to be holding it and then it gives way, and yeah, obviously that could be bad news for you. And then the shelf, you kind of got to get it at the right angle, but it should slide right in. And I don't recommend filling up this part with food yet. You want to make sure you have a visual on this part. That water is going to drip down if it does fail. We'll have to do the process here and get that new one installed. But this, for the most part, looks clean and good, so I'm happy with that. Now, what about this piece? Did you forget about this toe kick? I don't know if it's called a toe kick, but we can call it that. Remember earlier in the video I mentioned don't use a drill to put these back in. You're going to want to use a screwdriver so that you don't overcrack the pieces or pinch anything. Make sure these are kind of tucked back away, especially that water line right there. You don't want... And by the way, take care with the water line if you are doing a DIY fix. You'll notice that it swings around wildly, that long water line, right, when you're welding it, for example, plastic welding it, and you don't want to step on it. I made that mistake, or almost stepped on it. It was fine, it didn't damage it, but definitely I could see that happening. And we'll hand tighten those down. We should be good there. And that is how I DIY fixed my water tank in my fridge. It's been working flawlessly for 3 weeks now or more. This is great news. Good luck to you. This has been a long video. Go get yourself a drink out of your new working fridge. Thanks so much.